It's really challenging because you have things like local codes in play. You have the human effect, right? You have egos and preferences and things like that. You have spatial constraints that change depending on the type of building. But at the end of the day, you can absolutely look at mapping those constraints into a formula that can be used to start the conversation of what does it look like to have true DFMA.
Yeah.
Because I think today's DFMA is designed for modularization. It's not designed for manufacturing. It's designed for can we build a cube? And let's be honest, no one wants to build a cube.
No.
Throughout history, architects have been sculptors, right? They're making the statue of David, right? But when you make the statue of David, you don't have to consider that he needs a brain and a heart and a circulatory system and a liver, and you don't have to do that. But when you make the human body, which is our living buildings that we inhabit every day, you have to start thinking about that. So it's how do we bring the living body into the sculpting process? That's part of the challenge and a part of the opportunity we have at Snaptrude.
You know what? It sounds a lot like what you're doing is what happened in manufacturing a little bit, where they ripped off the MA from the DFMA and they said, well, what if we design for the environment? What if we design for
Exactly.
high energy input? What if we design for, and build in at the earliest stages the understanding of the concepts that make a building great. So I'm really excited to see that get started and get moving. Do you as you're going out, because you talked about, we always move before we understand the problem. I sometimes think I'd almost rather you make solutions for the jobs that I don't want to do rather than the problems I have. But in that case, are you seeing that people are seeing a lack of that pre-planning piece as one of these huge problems? Like when you planned, you did not plan for the reality of construction?
I think there's a part of that. I think that's part of the idea behind the statue of David versus a living body.
Exactly.
There's just not that thought. But I also think that the pre-planning process is optimized for the wrong results. So if you're looking at how we're planning a project, we're typically planning on this customer wants this box to cost $80 million. And it's like, okay, well, do you care to have an HVAC system? Well, oh yeah, of course we do. Well, that's a variable you didn't put in there. Okay, do you want to have a parking lot? Well, yeah, of course, because we need people to be able to park to come here. That's another variable. And so when we start with too few constraints. And so things tend to slip between the cracks. And it's only discovered when the trade contractors are trying to actually build the thing. And that's why we have so many RFIs and change orders that come back up, because it's just not well thought through. Because again, as much as we can do at the architectural level to think through those things, we don't usually have the time or resources allocated to doing that by our customers.
And I think this is where I would jump in and say, like, even if you had all the time in the world, there's too many constraints for you to really understand, right? This isn't a matter of, this is where that perspective and perception come in, is that like, we think that they don't want to, but actually in talking to and starting to understand this process, there's just no possible way that an architect can understand all of that and still be great at what they do and be efficient in what they do, right? Like it's its own little diagram of a Venn diagram of things that you can and cannot have. And that's just the way it is. And so what you're saying is, and it's funny, this might be my naivety, but it's changing the discussion from productization to constraints and giving constraints up front that will allow them to design in a way that will allow us downstream construction, general contractors and trade contractors to operate in a better set and a better environment, which is pretty wild.
Dude, it's digital empathy. You're designing for digital empathy. We're going to set up rules to make the beginning of the project empathetic towards the way that you laid out the David just kind of sunk in as I was, but you are designing a product that has digital empathy for the construction process, pushing that back to people that, like Jeff said, don't have the time or the ability to build that for themselves. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That was just
No.
you guys are
That's a
awesome.
great perspective. It's results driven. It's not necessarily just constraints, because constraints are what limit the number of results you can have. So if you say, I want this result, then you can work backward through constraints and then into your function and your mathematical equation. So going back to like computational and generative and AI, one perspective I think we need to change, and this is also from that piece by Professor Nurian, is that he brings up this gentleman who said, and it's probably controversial, but he says, it's gardening, not architecture. And I would also say it's gardening, not construction. And what I mean by that is, with the improvement of AI has been around since the 60s, but with the improvement of AI and generative design and all the tools that we're all out here building and solutions that we're all out here building for these problems, we have to understand it's an iterative approach. And you don't have to come up with the Statue of David conceptually before you understand that we want a building that is a hospital that has a certain ROI to it, and work backwards through that. It's not easy, but I think the more we work together earlier, from trade through architecture, the more likely that those results will be ones with far less delays, cost overruns, et cetera. And I think we don't need to, it doesn't have to be IPD, it doesn't have to be design build, design assist, it doesn't have to be named something fancy. Let's just all work together a little bit earlier and come up with solutions to problems before they come up.